This week I came across some interesting news, which, upon further reflection and research, shattered my preconceived ideas as to how much diamonds are really worth. And maybe you read this as well too. I even learned a new number. But I always thought that diamonds were a valuable piece of, a valuable commodity, a valuable rock. That many thousands of dollars are spent in American households to procure and treasure jewelry which contains these precious stones. In fact, in one article I read that there were three popular things, guarantees that you could find in a typical American household. Number one was a TV set. Number two, diamonds or jewelry. And number three, children. In that order. TVs, jewelry, and children. Well, in my digging around, and I'll share with you that scientists from MIT and other places, other institutions, discovered that below the surface of the earth there lies a supply of diamonds that is just astounding. They call it a quadrillion tons of diamonds. That's a 1 with 15 zeros behind it. That's enough diamonds to equip every person on the planet with about over 100 million tons worth. How would you like to have your share of those diamonds? Now the other truth attached to this is that diamonds, even the ones we have access to, are far more common than we realize, and that the De Beers Mining Company, now known as De Beers Diamond Cartel, control the diamonds that are produced in order to keep them rare so the prices stay high. Ever notice that you can never resell them for the same price you bought them? That should be a sign right there. They're just not as worth as much as we think they are. And now if there's a quadrillion tons of them underneath the surface of the earth, how much less are they worth now? The only catch to this is, if you say, okay, I'm going to leave here and get my tonnage of diamonds, the only catch to this is that they are found 200 miles below the surface of the earth. Now, to put this into a little bit of perspective, the deepest hole dug by the Russians, the Kola super borehole in Russia, it took them 20 years to get to a depth of 7.5 miles. So if it takes 20 years to get 7.5 miles down, it would actually take about 500 years just to get to the 200-mile depth with our current technology. So basically, it's impossible to get to. As close as it seems to be, it's just right below your feet. There's this geological structure called a craton, which is below the tectonic plates that are crust, are movable crust. When we get earthquakes and stuff like that, all that stuff sits atop. The very thin. If you were to use an onion skin as your analogy, the very thin top layer of the planet, 200 miles down is still impossible to get to, even though it's a relatively small distance compared to the rest of the planet. But it's right there below the surface of your feet. I mean, how awesome would that be? You get to a portion of a rock that really isn't worth much, yet we attach value to it. Can you imagine finding a treasure like that in the middle of a field and then selling everything because you know that something more valuable is there that secures your future? We invest a lot also in looking as far out in the space as we can. You're looking for the origins of life, and I don't know how far we'd have to look in order for our physical eyes to see the kingdom of heaven. I don't know how many light years that is away. We can't see it. whether it's withheld from our view or anything like that. But as impossible as it is to get 200 miles down, it's impossible for us to see the kingdom of heaven with our telescopes. Yet, somehow, it has been made accessible. It has been made accessible. And we have this parable in Matthew 13, verse 44. And Jesus starts it off by saying the kingdom of heaven is like. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. The treasure is the gospel, hidden within the pages of this book. Now, if it's hidden, it's all over this book, so it's not hidden very well. But sometimes we have a hard time finding it. The harder thing to find is the value in it. But here, the treasure is the kingdom of heaven, and the field is this book. So in order to find the treasure, where do we have to be looking? In the book. Yeah, we have to be looking in the book. Now, Jesus uses a material parable, one that appeals to our material nature, right? Because we like stuff. When we find a good deal, have you noticed we are able to find the funds to get what it is that the good deal is all about? Yeah, and we have the conversation with our family, with our spouse. Yes, we can survive going into debt a little bit more because we found something of incredible value that will pay off what it is that we have invested in. Yeah, we use the sales pitches all because of the great treasure that we found, the great deal that has been offered to us. And so he uses an example like this. A man in a field finds a treasure in a field. Land that isn't really worth very much, but the treasure in it. Nobody else knows about it. Nobody else. So he spends every penny to secure the ownership of this field. Probably looking like a fool to all of his neighbors. What is he doing? Spending all that money in that worthless land. My aunt has land, my brother has land. I should go pay them a visit and see what I find. Maybe they haven't found anything yet. Who knows? But the idea is the kingdom of heaven is very real. It's very real, and if we look in the field, we will find it. We will find it. Now, there are the conflict I want to bring your attention to is can we successfully hold on to both? He had to give up. With joy. He didn't count this as a burden to give up everything. With joy, he sold everything. Everything. Didn't hold anything back. What happens to those who end up keeping something back for themselves while trying to secure the kingdom at the same time? The Bible has a few examples of that. We can go to the Old Testament. It's Joshua 7. And this is on the heels of a tremendous victory of the Israelites at Jericho. Jericho was famous for having that wall that was impossible to pull down. And God set it up in such a way, gave the children of Israel instructions enough that the evidence of their victory was not in anything the Israelites did. Except for following the instructions God gave to them. To march around the city, blow their trumpets and shout, right? What's that going to do to bring walls down? Absolutely nothing. But what happened? The walls came down, and God gave specific instructions that the spoils of that battle were to go completely, all of it, into the treasury of God. Nobody was to take anything for themselves. But one person witnessed the manifestation of God's incredible power, and yet held on to something that he wasn't supposed to. A Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold, I think weighing 50 shekels, something like that. Read the story. You can read the story. His name was Achan. And then when they went to go against a much smaller city, again following the promises of God, 36 of them died as a result. 36 Israelites. They lost. They were sent running. They were sent packing. God wasn't with them. And then when Joshua, in his deep grief, reached out to God in prayer, God told him there's sin in the camp. Somebody didn't follow my instructions. And so the finger pointed to Achan, and Achan and his family were brought forth. They stoned Achan and his family and burned them with fire. And then the wrath of God against the Israelites subsided. So there we have a very tragic story of what the results of one man trying to hold on to both. Right? If you're trying to hold on to both, then there's something we're not convinced of. Right? If we have to have one hand on the treasures of the earth, then we're not totally convinced as to the worth of the treasure of heaven. Which means we haven't found it yet. It says here in the parable, when a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold all he had. He was convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt. He was convinced. Have you been convinced about the kingdom of heaven described in the pages of this book? Are you convinced? You know, that's a question for reflection. That's a question that you say in your that you ask of God in your personal devotions. But the thing is, if you don't have it, and it's just an elementary question, how are you going to find an answer that's going to convince you? What are the things that are truly worth something? Right? Now we have to go on. There's another example. There's a man in the Bible, a very popular man, by the name of Judas. He was blessed by God as one of the 12 disciples, blessed with the ability to heal and to preach and to teach. He was educated. He also had another responsibility. Do you remember what other responsibility he had? He was the treasurer. In John 12, verse 6, it says here, this is in the midst of the story of Mary, who took a year's worth of her wages and purchased this bottle of wine to anoint Jesus' feet. And he was right there criticizing. He was right there. It says, one of his disciples, John 12, verse 4, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was, what does your Bible say? A thief, as keeper of the money bag. He used to help himself to what was put in it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. The thing about Judas is that as keeper of the money bag, he had cultivated the habit of gratifying himself with it. He would secretly take things from it and justify himself that he was doing whatever he needed to do. And he would take things without anybody knowing. But Jesus knew he used to help himself to what was put into it. happens when we get into the habit of gratifying ourselves? See, it was this kind of foundation that he built on that led to him accepting the 30 pieces of silver to betray his Lord. He was trying to hold on to both. He'd had a very real taste of what the kingdom of God represented, and Jesus being the embodiment of that. And then with the other hand, he's holding on to the treasures of the earth. He wasn't convinced. He wasn't convinced like this man in the parable that Jesus was describing. He wasn't convinced about the worth of the kingdom of heaven. The other tragic story, it was covered in our Sabbath school lesson. Ananias and Sapphira in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 5. Wow. Starting with verse 1. Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself and brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't it the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied to just human beings, but to God. When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died, and great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then sometime later, his wife showed up, not knowing what had happened to him. And they asked her, was not the land sold for such and such price? And she said, yes, it was. And the same sentence fell upon her. Now, throughout the years of reading this story, I've always thought, wow, wasn't that kind of harsh? And the Achan story, wasn't that kind of harsh? But the lesson brought out something that hit me square between the eyes. And I'm going to admit something to you about my own journey that maybe it'll resonate with some of you. That we're all sinners guilty of death. And most of the time when we sin, punishment is deferred. And that was the point the lesson was making. Because God can be fair in punishing us on the spot every time we sin. We fall into danger when we presume upon His grace. That, oh, well, there are no consequences. And now here's my example. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of how many have ever texted while driving. Or have been distracted while driving. But I have. I've done it before. I'm guilty. I've been distracted. And there are times where it has come straight into my mind as I've reached to change the song on the phone or read a text that my eyes have been off the road and I blow through a crosswalk or something where I know that somebody could have been there. And it has come straight into my mind more than once. Harold, you could have killed somebody back there. But by God's grace, nobody was there. But somebody could have been there. I was the recipient of grace. And I had a conversation with one of my children about this. That the price that is paid may not be on me. It may be on those who witness what I was doing. And of course, I now have 2 kids who have driver's licenses. Whew, boy. We can send them out solo now. I mean, that's terrifying. But the thing is, they've seen us take these chances. And I said, you know what? It's not worth it to take those chances. And I confess that there almost every time I have taken that risk and I've taken my eyes off the road and I realize, oh, there could have been somebody there. How many other times has grace has punishment not been deferred? And we hear the stories in the news about people getting killed, people getting injured, that sort of thing. Now, there's a deeper lesson to this. Yes, don't text and drive, don't be distracted and drive, because you may trust in your skills, but one day grace is going to run out. And the punishment is going to be right there. We can't hold on to the control of the wheel and have our attention somewhere else at the same time. Principle with what was going on with Achan, Judas, Ananias is that they were holding on to heaven and holding on to the earth, and they couldn't focus on both. A price was to be paid, and the price was a terrible one. Because sometimes it affects our families, it affects our children, it affects those around us. All because we're not convinced. We're not convinced I'm not as bad as driver as all that. I am safe. I know enough to maintain control while my attention is somewhere else. That's pride talking. Or we can say, regarding the kingdom of heaven, I know enough about the kingdom of heaven to get in while still enjoying the treasures of the world. It is a deception. It is a deception. And sometimes the punishment comes immediately, and it's sudden and tragic. Other times, it is deferred, while God in His mercy and grace allows us to reflect on the things that we have done so that we can change course, and share our stories with others so that they don't have to make the same mistakes we did. We can't have both. We can't drive and have our attention on somewhere else. We can't have our hand on heaven and on the earth at the same time. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I want to take you back to this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went, sold all he had, and bought that field. I started to see Jesus in this. Yes, it is Jesus speaking this. But in the previous parables, he said that the field is the world. What did he find in this world that was of such value that he sold everything? Now, when I say he sold everything, he gave up heaven, he gave up his life. What did Jesus find so valuable that he gave it all up? He found you. He found me. That just blows me away. You are the most valuable thing to him. You are the most valuable person to him. So valuable that he gave it all up. And then for us to discover him and his goodness. All right, what does John 3:16 say? You all know it by heart. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes in him should not, what? Perish, but have everlasting life. God gave it all up to buy you from this field of the world. That is a most amazing treasure. Look, it's not worth it to dig 200 miles down for just a bunch of rock. It's not worth it to spend untold billions to look off into space to see if we can catch a glimpse of where God is. He's right here. He's right here. And he says, if you search for him, you'll find him. If you really mean it when you search for him. And, there's going to be times when we don't feel like it. Keep on looking. The joy will be there. The joy will come when you find Him and find how much He loves you. Because when you find that out, there won't be anything on this world that will hold you back. You freely give it all up. I'm not telling you have to give it all up. No, this will be with joy from your heart. This is a response to finding the greatest deal of all. If you're willing to go in debt for a material commodity that you think will bless you and your family, and you go to great lengths to convince your spouse and your kids that you need to go into debt to get this, how much more eternal life and being with Jesus for eternity? With joy, He gave it all up. Why? Because He found something that was valuable. If you haven't found anything valuable in this book yet, for all the years that each of you have been alive, then you haven't spent enough time in it to find it. Because I tell you, when you find that valuable thing in here, when you find Jesus, when you find His kingdom, it will change your life forever. It will change your life. It's not enough to have a head knowledge, because that's merely just holding on to Him with one hand and holding on to the world with the other. It doesn't work. It ends in destruction. You are His greatest treasure. He finds His pleasure in you. He went to the cross because He loves you. Jesus is coming again to claim those He has purchased, to claim those that He has found. And each of you have been found by Him. Some of you just don't know He did. The question I have for you, the appeal I have for you is He worth looking for? Is the kingdom worth looking for? I'm going to ask you again. It's okay to respond. Is the kingdom of heaven worth looking for?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And not just one day, not just 2 days. Look for Him every day. You will find in its pages the treasure that will change your life forever. You will be like the man in this parable. When he found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. You know, we look at that line, sold all he had and bought the field, and it just terrifies us. Why? Because we don't have the joy. We haven't made the discovery yet. We think the guy's unreasonable. We think he's crazy, off his rocker. Until the treasure has to be found first. I can't ask you to give it all up when you haven't found the treasure yet. No, because you haven't seen the value in the kingdom of heaven. So keep searching. Keep searching. Be honest in your search. Put God to the test. See if He will not reveal Himself to you. I guarantee you, He will not remain hidden if you give Him another search. And when you find Him, guess what? Your life is going to change. Your life is going to change. Scriptures guarantee it.